The storm broke over the Blackthorn estate with a violence most unnatural. Lightning illuminated the crumbling manor perched high upon the Yorkshire moors, while thunder rattled its shuttered windows. Inside, the household stirred uneasily, for the night carried whispers of long-forgotten secrets. When dawn came, Lord Blackthorn was discovered lifeless in his private study, his hand frozen over an open diary, the ink smeared as though the words themselves resisted being read. A single line stood out, hastily scrawled before death claimed him. "The past will not remain buried." It was at this moment that Hercule Poirot, summoned under peculiar circumstances, first laid eyes upon the mystery of Blackthorn. Chapter 1. Arrival at Blackthorn. The train cut through the Yorkshire moors like a serpent of smoke and iron, its whistle echoing across the desolate landscape. Gray clouds pressed low against the earth, and the heather swayed in restless patterns beneath a wind that seemed to whisper secrets. Hercule Poirot, seated in a first-class carriage, leaned slightly forward, peering through the window with an expression of both curiosity and distaste. "Mon Dieu," he muttered, brushing a speck of soot from his perfectly pressed cuff. "It is always the same with these English trains. Smoke, cinders, and discomfort for the mustaches. Hastings, you will agree, no?" Captain Arthur Hastings, ever loyal companion and narrator of many of Poirot's cases, suppressed a smile. He had long since grown accustomed to his friend's fastidiousness. "It's not so bad, Poirot. Besides, it suits the mood of where we're headed. Look at that manor on the hill, Blackthorn. Grim, isn't it?" Poirot followed Hastings' gaze. There, upon the crest of a slope, the manor revealed itself in glimpses as the train curved along the track. A vast Gothic structure, its towers like broken teeth against the skyline, its windows shuttered as though shielding themselves from the world. Even at this distance, there was an air of foreboding about it, as though the house itself bore witness to secrets it had no wish to relinquish. "Yes, the place," Hastings remarked, glancing at Poirot. "Why is it, do you think, these country houses always look as though they're guarding a secret?" "Because, mon ami, they are," Poirot replied with a knowing smile. "Behind every shutter, a little drama. Behind every locked drawer, a truth concealed. And it is for Hercule Poirot to reveal it." When at last they reached the gates of Blackthorn, the ironwork twisted into thorn-like patterns. The driver slowed. The gates groaned open at his command, revealing the long avenue of yews that led to the house. Their branches arched overhead, forming a tunnel of darkness. Hastings shivered slightly, but Poirot merely adjusted his hat. The carriage drew up before the front entrance, a great oak door carved with grotesque faces. As they descended, the door opened, and Lady Eleanor Blackthorn herself appeared to greet them. She was a tall, austere woman in her late 40s, dressed in mourning black, her face pale but composed. Only her eyes betrayed the strain of recent days. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," she said, her voice low, steady. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. My husband's death has left us unsettled. The authorities insist it was his heart, but—" She faltered, her lips tightening. "I cannot accept it. There are things he wrote, things he said, that convince me foul play was at hand." Poirot bowed deeply, his hand over his chest. "Madame, it is always my honor to be of service in such matters. Where there is suspicion, there must also be clarity. You speak of writings? Perhaps you will show them to me." "In due course," Lady Eleanor said, her gaze flickering toward the shadowed corridor behind her. "For now you must meet the household. You will want to form your impressions. The great hall of Blackthorn was as solemn as a cathedral. The stone floor bore the chill of centuries. The walls hung with faded tapestries depicting hunts and battles. A massive fireplace dominated one end, its hearth empty save for the ashes of a fire long gone cold. Above the mantel hung a portrait of Lord Blackthorn in his youth, a man of stern features and piercing eyes, painted in the full air. Gently. Perhaps you are right, monsieur. But sometimes the heart fails not from nature, but from design. Arthur's lips pressed into a thin line. Next was Clara Whitmore, the governess. She was a woman of 35, plain-featured, but with eyes that spoke of quiet intensity. She carried herself with the modesty of one accustomed to living in the shadows of others, yet there was something in her expression, a suppressed fervor, that caught Poirot's notice. She bowed her head respectfully but said little. Then came Dr. Julian Harrow, the family physician, a man in his 40s, his hair thinning, his manner calm and professional. He shook Poirot's hand firmly, his eyes steady behind round spectacles. "I attended Lord Blackthorn in his final hours," he said. "I can attest it was his heart. There were no signs of violence, no evidence of poison. I trust my word will carry some weight, Monsieur Poirot." "Of course, Doctor," Poirot said smoothly, though his mustache twitched in faint amusement. "But you see, I am a man most obstinate. I must satisfy myself." Lady Eleanor's gaze swept the room. "These are those closest to my husband. If there are answers, they lie here." Poirot inclined his head. "And now, madame, may I see the study where Lord Blackthorn died?" They ascended the grand staircase, the carpet worn in places by generations of feet. At the far end of the corridor, Lady Eleanor paused before a heavy door, her hand trembling slightly as she pushed it open. The study was a cavernous room, lined with shelves of leather-bound volumes. The curtains were half-drawn, casting long shadows across the desk at its center. There, untouched since the night of his death, lay the diary. Its leather cover was cracked with age, its pages filled with neat handwriting. The final entry was left unfinished, the ink smeared as though by a trembling hand. Poirot approached reverently. He bent low, examining the page. His finger traced the last line. "The past will not remain buried." The penstroke ended abruptly, the ink pooling. "Strange are what lead us to the whole cloth of truth." The others watched uneasily, the silence pressing close. Outside, the storm broke once more, rain lashing against the windows as thunder rolled across the moors. Poirot turned back to the diary, his hand resting lightly upon its cover. "It whispers," he said softly. "This book, it whispers of secrets. And Hercule Poirot, he always listens." The chapter ended with the storm's fury, the diary lying open like a wound upon the desk, and the household gathered in tense expectation of what this small, meticulous Belgian detective might uncover. Chapter 2. Shadows of the Diary. The next morning dawned gray over Blackthorn, though one could hardly call it morning in spirit. The clouds hung so low they seemed to press against the chimneys, and the moor stretched endlessly beneath a pall of mist. Inside the manor, breakfast was a solemn affair. The household gathered around the long dining table, each place set with precise formality, though little was eaten. Poirot, immaculate in his suit and perfectly symmetrical mustaches, observed each face from his seat at Lady Eleanor's right. Hastings, positioned opposite, noted the same detail as always. How his friend never appeared to consume more than the thinnest slice of toast and a cup of chocolate, yet always emerged from meals satisfied, his mind nourished instead by observation. Arthur Blackthorn sat sullenly, stabbing at his eggs as though they had personally offended him. Clara Whitmore, the governess, pale from a restless night, barely touched her porridge. Dr. Harrow, composed but watchful, sipped his tea with a measured hand. Lady Eleanor herself presided at the head of the table, her posture unyielding, though the strain about her mouth betrayed fatigue. It was Arthur who broke the silence. "Tell me, Poirot," he said, his tone edged with contempt. "Do you truly imagine my father was murdered? It seems to me a convenient occupation for men like heart of this mystery, as surely as your late master's own heart ceased within that room." Arthur shifted uncomfortably. "If you mean to paw over my father's private writings, I will not allow it. The man is dead. He deserves dignity, not to be dissected like some frog in a laboratory." Lady Eleanor's voice cut across his protest, sharp as glass. "You will allow it, Arthur. Your father entrusted me with the keeping of this house. If Monsieur Poirot believes the diary significant, then it shall be examined." Arthur flushed, his jaw tightening, but he said nothing more. Poirot rose gently, dabbing his lips with his napkin. "Madame, I would like to return to the study. There are things that must be seen again, with the morning light." The study was as they had left it, the curtains half drawn, the desk cluttered with papers, the diary lying open as though still awaiting its author's hand. Poirot moved slowly around the room, touching nothing, his eyes darting like those of a bird. He stopped before the desk and bent low once more over the diary. "Observe, Hastings. Do you see how the ink spreads here, at the final line? It is not the tremor of age alone. The pen was pressed too firmly, as though, how shall I put it, as though a hand guided unwilling fingers." Hastings frowned. "Do you mean someone else was in the room with him, forcing him to write?" "Not forcing, perhaps. Guiding, encouraging. Imagine, mon ami, the old man weak, frail, his heart fluttering like a bird, and another beside him, whispering, 'Write, write this truth, it must be known.' And then, the ink, the collapse, la mort." Lady Eleanor crossed herself unconsciously. "You chill me, Monsieur Poirot. But who could have wished for such words to be left behind?" Poirot's mustaches twitched. "That, madame, is the question. The diary is both testament and trap. It reveals and conceals in the same breath. May I?" He gestured delicately to the book. At her nod, he turned the pages with care, scanning entries that chronicled the late lord's daily affairs, meetings, accounts, weather observations. But observe from the shadows who see the clearest. A governess, for example. She is in the house, yet not of the house. She knows more than she believes. Arthur barked a laugh. "Clara knows nothing. My father dismissed her months ago, yet she lingered on in my mother's charity. If you seek a plotter, Monsieur Poirot, look to her. She has every reason to resent my father." Clara's face flushed, her lips parting in indignation, but she said nothing. Lady Eleanor's cold voice intervened. "That is enough, Arthur. Miss Whitmore has been loyal beyond measure. If she knows something, she will speak in her own time." Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, madame, but for now let us consider. This diary, it is not only what is written, but also what is left unwritten. Look. He turned the final page, where the ink trailed off. Then, deftly, he angled the paper toward the light streaming faintly through the curtains. There, faintly impressed upon the sheet, were indentations. Marks of a pen upon the following page, though no ink had flowed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Voila! The ghost of words not written but pressed. Someone attempted to write further, perhaps Lord Blackthorn, perhaps another, yet the ink was dry, the pen failing, or the hand too weak. We have impressions. Hastings leaned in, squinting. I can barely see them, Poirot. Patience, mon ami. We shall reveal them. A simple trick, known to every schoolboy. Poirot reached for a soft pencil from the desk, shading lightly across the page. Slowly, like an apparition, the indentations revealed themselves. Words emerged. The child knows. There was a stunned silence. The child? Lady Eleanor whispered. What child? Arthur scoffed. Nonsense. He was raving. But Clara's hands shook as she clasped them tightly together. No, she said, her voice barely audible. He meant it. Poirot turned sharply, catching her words. You believe so, mademoiselle? She bit her lip, pale as death. I cannot. Now. He raised his finger dramatically, his eyes glittering. Now we must ask, what knowledge is so dangerous that it requires death to silence it? The room seemed to darken with his words. Outside, the storm that had threatened all morning finally broke, rain lashing against the windows with sudden fury. A crack of thunder rolled across the moors, rattling the glass in its panes. Poirot turned, his silhouette framed against the light of the window, his voice dropping to a whisper. No, mes amis. He did not write alone. Someone was there, guiding, pressing, ensuring his final words. The diary is not the end, it is the beginning, and Hercule Poirot will not rest until the shadows of the diary yield their truth. Chapter 3. The Suspects Unveiled. The storm had left Blackthorn Manor shrouded in a damp gloom, as though the very stones of the house had absorbed its violence. The morning air within the corridors was heavy with a faint scent of extinguished fires, and the silence of the household seemed more oppressive than ever. Poirot, undeterred by such atmospheres, declared that it was time. Mesdames, Messieurs, he said in his precise, clipped manner, it is the hour to assemble. I wish to speak with each of you, but first, I ask you all to join me in the drawing room. There are truths which must be heard together, that the little gray cells may have the full panorama of human emotion. Lady Eleanor, though pale with fatigue, agreed. A servant was dispatched, and soon the family and staff gathered in the long, oak-paneled chamber, where heavy drapes muted the outside light. Poirot positioned himself before the fire, his back straight, his hands folded, the little mustaches quivering with anticipation. Hastings stood loyally at his side, notebook in hand, though he rarely wrote more than impressions. Let us begin, Poirot said gently, his eyes sweeping over the assembly. We are a small company. Each of you loved, served, or depended upon the late Lord Blackthorn. Yet he is gone, and his final words point not to peace, but to secrets. Often retiring to his study late at night to write. When I asked what troubled him, he would only say that the sins of the past had come home to roost. He was afraid, Monsieur Poirot. Afraid of something or someone. Très intéressant, Poirot murmured. And did he mention this child, the one who knows? Her gaze flickered. No, but he often spoke of betrayals long ago. I thought it the melancholy of age. I never imagined. She faltered, her composure cracking for the briefest instant before she straightened once more. Poirot's eyes softened. Merci, madame. Now, Monsieur Arthur. Arthur shifted irritably. You'll have me say I despised my father, no doubt. And it's true, we did not get along. He disapproved of my friends, my business ventures. He cut off my allowance more than once. But that does not mean I wished him dead. I have debts, yes, but I would hardly risk prison for them. Ah, Poirot said lightly. So you admit to debts? Arthur's jaw tightened. I do not deny it, but what of it? Plenty of men live on credit. My father was a miser with his fortune, always hoarding, never sharing. He would rather see Blackthorn rot than help his own son. If you must know, I am relieved he cannot torment me further. But murder? Nonsense. I have no need to kill. Poirot nodded, unperturbed by the young man's bitterness. We shall see, monsieur. Motive, perhaps, but opportunity? That is another thing. His gaze turned to Clara Whitmore, who sat rigid, her hands clasped in her lap. Mademoiselle, you served this family many years, I am told. Tell me, what was your relationship with Lord Blackthorn? Clara's lips pressed together before she answered. I came to Blackthorn as governess when Arthur was a boy. I remained to tutor the younger cousins when they visited. To manage the household's education, twitched. Yet you are a man of science. Surely you considered why his final words were so dramatic. Harrow's expression did not change. Men near death often ramble. It is not uncommon. You cannot build a case on the scribblings of a failing hand. Poirot's eyes glittered. Perhaps not, monsieur. But you are a physician. You prescribe, yes? Medicines, powders, tinctures. Tell me, have you in your keeping a record of all that you dispensed to Lord Blackthorn? The doctor hesitated, ever so slightly. Naturally. Bon, I will see it. Poirot's tone brooked no refusal. Harrow gave a curt nod. As you wish. For a moment, silence reigned in the room. Then, Poirot clasped his hands. So, mes amis, what do we have? A son estranged from his father, burdened by debts. A governess, dismissed and humiliated, who perhaps knows secrets better left hidden. A physician whose word is law in matters of health, yet whose records we have not seen. And a widow, left with a house heavy with shadows. He stepped back, his voice low but clear. The stage is set. Each of you has reason to wish silence upon Lord Blackthorn. But one among you, one, acted. The diary. It does not lie. It whispers still. Hastings shifted uneasily. You make it sound as though every one of them could be guilty, Poirot. Poirot smiled faintly. That, mon ami, is the beauty of human nature. It is most obliging. It provides us with suspects. but it is also most vain. It betrays itself. We need only watch, and the truth will emerge. He turned back to the desk, his fingers brushing the diary once more. Suddenly he froze. His sharp eyes had caught something, a faint tearing at the edge of the final page. With the delicacy of a jeweler, he lifted the flap of paper. Beneath it, pressed faintly into the next sheet, were indentations. Not words this time, but the beginning of a name. Poirot's voice dropped to a murmur. The matter. It was a chamber lined with shelves of dark mahogany, crowded with volumes on history, law, and travel. Yet the most important object sat upon the desk. The diary of Lord Blackthorn, its final page a tantalizing riddle of half-written words and faded ink. Poirot bent over it with fastidious care, a magnifying glass in hand. Hastings leaned nearby, peering over his shoulder with far less success. "I say, Poirot," Hastings muttered, "are you quite certain the old fellow meant to write a name? Could it not have been the beginning of some other word? Eternal, perhaps, or enemy?" Poirot's mustache twitched. "Ah, Hastings, you leap to conclusions, but you leap too broadly. Regard the flourish, the curve. It is the first letter of a proper noun, not a common word. Observe the depth of the stroke." He pressed down, as though with urgency. "No, mon ami, this was no idle scribble. He sought to reveal." Hastings frowned. But why only one letter? If he knew he was dying, surely he would have written more. Poirot straightened, folding his hands delicately. "It is the tragedy of death, Hastings. It silences at the very moment of revelation. But let us not despair. A single letter, when placed within the right context, may shout louder than a page of words. We must see where it points." He beckoned Lady Eleanor into the study. She entered slowly, her face pale but composed. Poirot gestured to the desk. "Madame, you recognize this diary?" She inclined her head. "Yes. My husband kept it locked in his desk. I never read it. He valued his privacy." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, madame, he wrote of betrayals. He feared the past. You must have noticed his disquiet." Lady Eleanor clasped her hands. "Yes, I noticed. But Henry was a man of many secrets. He had dealings from long ago, legal disputes, quarrels with old acquaintances. I believed it was those shadows that troubled him. He was not a man to share easily." Poirot tapped. Edmund Vale, the family lawyer, arrived at Poirot's summons. He was a dry, thin man with spectacles that gleamed coldly in the dim light. He bowed slightly as he entered. "You requested me, Monsieur Poirot?" "Indeed, monsieur. We must know what provisions did Lord Blackthorn make in his will." Vale cleared his throat. "The late Lord's will is clear. The estate itself passes to Lady Eleanor for her lifetime. Upon her death it reverts to Arthur. Certain financial bequests were arranged, sums to longtime servants, a donation to a hospital in London. But the greater fortune is secured within the estate. Lady Eleanor has control, though she may not dispose of the property entirely." Arthur's face darkened. "So I inherit nothing, nothing, until my mother dies?" Vale spread his hands. "That is the legal arrangement, yes." Arthur's lips curled in bitter scorn. "Then I see perfectly why my father distrusted me. He meant to chain me, even from beyond the grave." Poirot nodded gravely. And yet, monsieur, one must ask, if Lady Eleanor were gone, then the estate would pass to you at once, n'est-ce pas? Arthur fell silent. Hastings, watching, shifted uncomfortably. Poirot let the silence linger, then turned once more to Vale. And tell me, monsieur, this diary, if it contained confessions, secrets, could it alter the legal inheritance? Vale frowned. Only if it revealed a codicil, a legal amendment. Otherwise, it is but a personal record. But I must warn you, Monsieur Poirot, the diary's admissibility is doubtful in a court. Eh bien, Poirot said softly. It is not for the courts, but for justice. As Vale departed, Poirot beckoned Hastings aside. You see, mon ami? The letter E is not so simple. Eleanor gains, yes, but she gains security, not freedom. Arthur gains nothing until she is gone. Each has reason, but the motives are not equal. There is something more. Poirot spent the afternoon examining the desk, the shelves, through the household like a chill draft. When Poirot disclosed the letters to Lady Eleanor, her face hardened with a dignity that belied her shock. So, she said coldly, this is the truth of his secrets. I was not the first, nor the only. Another woman, another family. Arthur, by contrast, exploded with fury. A bastard child. Do you mean to say some stranger has a claim upon my inheritance? Poirot raised a hand. Calm yourself, monsieur. Nothing is yet proven. But it explains the fear of Lord Blackthorn. A secret long buried may return to destroy. Lady Eleanor's voice trembled. Do you truly believe that Henry was murdered for this? That someone sought to silence him before the truth emerged? Poirot's eyes gleamed. It is possible. And yet perhaps it was Lord Blackthorn himself who sought to protect this child with his final act. We must know more of Emily Harwood. He dispatched Hastings to make inquiries of the village archives, the parish records. Meanwhile, Poirot requested a private interview with Clara Whitmore. When she entered, he wasted no time. Mademoiselle, I must ask plainly, did you know of Emily Harwood? Clara's face blanched. Her hands trembled. Why do you ask me? Because, mademoiselle, you were governess here many years. You would have known whispers, seen letters. Perhaps you even knew the child. Clara sank into a chair. For a moment, her composure shattered. Yes, I knew. Emily Harwood was a companion of mine in youth. She came to me once, desperate, with her child, a boy. She begged me to speak with Lord Blackthorn, but he had already turned from her. He had chosen another path. I helped her for a time, but she vanished soon after, taking the child. I thought them lost forever. Poirot's voice was gentle. And yet you remained here, serving his household. Did you never fear the truth would emerge? Clara's eyes filled with tears. I feared every day, but what could I do? I was bound by loyalty, to Emily, to the child, and straight. Chapter 5. The Shadow of Emily Harwood. The storm passed in the night, but Blackthorn Manor awoke to a stillness even heavier than before. The air smelled of damp earth. The trees in the park bent with rain, their branches dripping as if in mourning. In the library, Poirot stood by the tall windows, his reflection doubled in the glass. Small, precise, and immovable, a man set against the vastness of the house. Hastings entered, stamping mud from his boots. His face was flushed with excitement. Poirot, I've been to the village as you asked. Quite a story I heard. Poirot inclined his head, fingertips steepled. Sit, Hastings. You will recount calmly, with order. Begin at the beginning. Hastings sat, brushing water from his coat. I went first to the parish clerk. He remembered Emily Harwood's name, though she hasn't been seen here in years. She was once a companion to Lady Eleanor's cousin, apparently, and lived in the village for a time after. Well, after she was abandoned. The clerk said she left suddenly, with her child, under a cloud of shame. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the child? Hastings nodded eagerly. A boy. The clerk swears he saw him, dark-haired, about 5 years old at the time. That would be nearly 30 years ago. No one in the village knows what became of them. Some say they went to London, others whisper of tragedy. There are even rumors, wild ones, that the boy grew up vowing revenge upon the Blackthorns. Poirot lifted a finger. Rumors, Hastings, are like weeds. They choke truth. But they also spring from seeds. We must examine the soil. He turned to the desk where the letters of Emily Harwood lay, their ink faded, but the passion unmistakable. One he had not yet shown the others, written in trembling hand. He shall know his father, or he shall know his vengeance. Do you see, Hastings? The words of a woman scorned. Such letters are dangerous, daggers in paper. And Lord Blackthorn, he hid them, but he did not destroy them. Pourquoi? Perhaps guilt, perhaps Miss Whitmore. But I say it is scandal you fear. My husband betrayed me once. I will not have his infidelities dragged into the light now. If this Emily had a child, let him remain nameless. What is past is past. Poirot bowed slightly. Forgive me, madame, but the past is never past when it writes itself into the present. If Lord Blackthorn feared exposure, someone feared it more. And murder. Ah, murder is the desperate remedy of secrets. Arthur entered behind her, his voice sharp. Well, then why not look to Miss Whitmore herself? She admits she knew Emily Harwood. She admits she kept the secret. Perhaps she has been in contact with this mysterious child. Perhaps she brought him here, into this house. Clara gasped. That is false. Arthur sneered. You defended her, mother. But can you defend this? She is tied to the scandal more than any of us. Poirot raised his hand. Enough. Each accusation is but noise until it is tested. The truth will reveal itself. Always, always, it reveals itself. He dismissed them gently, then turned to Hastings. We must seek, mon ami, not in gossip, not in rage, but in evidence. The diary, it may yet yield more. The letters, they are part of a pattern. And there is the study itself, where Lord Blackthorn died. I am not yet satisfied. Poirot knelt by the hearth, examining the ashes with delicate precision. With tweezers, he drew forth charred fragments of paper, their edges curled. He spread them carefully upon blotting paper. You see, he burned something, but not completely. Hastings bent close. Can you read it? Poirot peered through his glass. Child. Claim. Ah, enough to confirm. Lord Blackthorn was writing of the child again, even that night. He meant to confess, bristled. More than real, Hastings. He is the phantom who haunts this house. Whether he stands among us or waits outside the gates, I cannot yet say. But the shadow of Emily Harwood stretches long, and it touches each of them. He turned again to the desk, his little gray cells whirring. The truth lies hidden in small things, mon ami. The ashes in the hearth, the unfinished letter, the tear in the diary's page. All speak if we but listen. And I tell you this, before long we shall see the child, not in whispers, but in flesh and blood. A draft stirred the curtains, and from the corridor came the echo of footsteps, soft, deliberate, as though someone lingered outside the study door, listening. Poirot's eyes flickered. You hear, Hastings? Already the shadow moves. Chapter 6. The Stranger at the Gates. The rain had ceased, but the air outside Blackthorn Manor was heavy with mist, the kind that clings to hedgerows and blurs the outline of the park. Dawn brought little comfort. Instead, the house seemed more isolated than ever, crouched like a brooding sentinel above the village. Poirot had risen earlier than usual, his sense of order already disturbed by the fragments he had uncovered in the study. He took his coffee in silence, his mustaches quivering with thought. Hastings, still yawning, watched him anxiously. You've scarcely spoken a word since last night, Poirot, Hastings said. Something's afoot, I can tell. Poirot set down his cup with deliberate precision. Yes, mon ami. Something moves, something just beyond our sight. The diary, the letters, the whispers of Emily Harwood. These are not relics only. They are threads that lead to a living hand. Before Hastings could reply, the sound of wheels on gravel drew their attention. From the dining room window, they saw a motor car approaching, its dark body glistening with dew. It came not from the village road, but from the lane that skirted the estate's northern boundary, seldom used by visitors. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Voila. Voice carried the accent of education, yet softened by something more provincial. He looked not at Lady Eleanor, but at Poirot, as though he recognized the true authority in the room. Poirot inclined his head. Monsieur Graves, why do you come now, at this moment of sorrow? The young man's jaw tightened. Because I have a right to be here, a right denied too long. My mother was Emily Harwood. The silence that followed was absolute. Lady Eleanor's face went white. Arthur gave a sharp cry of incredulity. Clara Whitmore, who had slipped in at the sound of voices, covered her mouth with a stifled gasp. Arthur sprang forward. This is a trick, a fortune hunter, nothing more. How dare you bring such lies into this house? Edward's eyes flashed. Lies? Ask your father's diary. Ask the letters he kept hidden. He promised my mother I would know my place. He promised to acknowledge me. But he cast us aside, left us to starve while he lived in splendor. Do you think I came for charity? No, I came for truth. Poirot raised his hand, quieting the tumult. Sit, monsieur. We shall not judge until we hear. Edward sat, his hands clenched tightly together. My mother died when I was a boy. She told me little, only that my father was a man of wealth and standing, who abandoned us for ambition. I was sent away, raised under another name. But as I grew, I learned the whispers. At last, the name Blackthorn reached my ears. I came once before, years ago, seeking him. I was turned away at the gates. Now he is dead, and I will not be silent any longer." Poirot studied him closely. The passion in his words rang with sincerity, yet his timing, so perfect, so dramatic, could not be ignored. "Tell me, monsieur," Poirot said softly. "Did you see Lord Blackthorn again before his death?" Edward shook his head. "No, I never had the chance. But I swear to you, I bear no guilt in his passing. I came only when I heard he was gone." Arthur sneered. "Convenient, isn't it?" Poirot withdrew with Hastings to the study. Hastings was restless. "You don't mean to say you believe him, Poirot? He could be an impostor, coached with just enough detail to make a claim." Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps, mon ami. But impostors reveal themselves in time. The true question is motive. If he is genuine, then Lord Blackthorn's secret has flesh. If he is false, then someone brought him forward as a distraction. Either way, he is the shadow the diary foretold." He tapped the burned fragments once more. "The child's claim." "What claim? Legal, emotional, or vengeance? We must know, and soon, for the air grows dangerous." That evening, a curious event unsettled the household further. While the family dined in strained silence, a servant reported that someone had been seen near the chapel ruins at the edge of the estate. A lantern flickered there briefly, then vanished. Arthur scoffed. Superstition. Poachers, most likely. But Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Non. It is a signal. Someone moves by night, unseen." He rose from the table. "Tomorrow, Hastings, we shall go to the chapel ruins. There, I think, lies another piece of the puzzle." As the company dispersed, Lady Eleanor paused at the doorway, her gaze fixed on Edward Graves. Her voice, low but clear, carried across the hall. "If you are truly Henry's son," she said, "then you will bring nothing but ruin to us all. I will not allow it." Edward met her eyes without flinching. "Then you already know the truth." And with that, the house once again trembled with silence. A silence more dangerous than any storm. Poirot, watching them both, murmured to Hastings, "Do you see, mon ami? Already the game sharpens. For if Edward Graves is indeed the heir, then his existence threatens all. And when a man's existence threatens, murder becomes inevitable." Chapter 7. Secrets in the Chapel Ruins. The next morning dawned gray, the fog thick as the fallen altar, and ivy clung to the crumbling arches. Hastings shivered. If ever a place deserved tales of hauntings, it's this. "Do you suppose someone really came here last night, Poirot?" Poirot's eyes scanned the ground with the precision of a surgeon. "Regard, Hastings. Footprints, fresh, pressed deep in the damp earth. A lantern was indeed carried. Note the melted wax upon this stone. Non, mon ami, this is no ghost. It is flesh and blood that walks here." He stepped carefully among the stones, his gaze settling upon a section of the wall where the ivy seemed recently disturbed. He reached forward, pulling back the tendrils. Behind them, set into the wall, was a narrow recess. Within lay a small wooden box, old yet surprisingly intact. Its surface scarred, but its lock broken long ago. Poirot drew it forth with delicate fingers. "Aha! What is it that we have here?" A reliquary of secrets, perhaps. They carried the box back into the light. Hastings, his curiosity overcoming his caution, leaned close as Poirot lifted the lid. Inside lay a bundle of letters, yellowed with age but bound neatly with a faded ribbon. Beside them, wrapped in oilcloth, rested a small silver locket. Poirot opened it to reveal the portrait of a woman, dark-eyed, beautiful, with a melancholy air unmistakable in her gaze. "Emily Harwood," Poirot whispered. "Sans doute. Here she rests, hidden all these years." Hastings whistled. So Lord Blackthorn kept her memory here, in secret, all the while his family believed her forgotten. Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, but observe. The lock of the box was long broken. Others have seen these things before us. Perhaps Lord Blackthorn himself. Perhaps another. And someone, Hastings, returned last night to disturb them again." He examined the letters. The handwriting was delicate, a woman's hand. The dates spanned many years, beginning in the late 1890s and continuing until the year of Emily Harwood's death. Each last night. Edward hesitated, then gave a short nod. "Yes, I came here to search for proof. Proof of what my mother told me, that he loved her, that he meant to acknowledge me. Without it, I am nothing but a liar in their eyes." Poirot's gaze was unreadable. "And yet, monsieur, to come here in the shadows, to disturb the relics in silence, it is not the act of innocence. It is the act of desperation." Edward's voice broke. "Would you have them all laugh at me? Call me a fraud, a beggar? I needed something that could not be denied." Poirot stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Perhaps, yes. But consider this, monsieur. Others know of this place. Others fear what is hidden here. And one among them has already killed to preserve their secret." Edward recoiled. "You think I—" Poirot raised a hand. "No. I think you are dangerous, but not in the way of a murderer. Yet beware, monsieur, for to those who covet, your existence is itself a crime." Edward's shoulders sagged. He turned his eyes to the portrait in the locket, his expression suddenly tender. "She looks just as I remember, though I was so young. She deserved more than secrecy." Poirot closed the box firmly. "Justice for her will come only through truth. And truth, monsieur, has a habit of revealing itself, no matter how deep one buries it in ruins." They parted there, Edward disappearing once more into the mist, leaving Poirot and Hastings with the box of secrets. Back at the manor, the discovery ignited fierce reaction. Lady Eleanor trembled as she held the letters, her eyes sharp with fury. "So it is true," she whispered. "All these years he kept her, even after marrying me. This is the betrayal that poisoned his soul." Arthur seized upon it at once. "Then what further proof do we need? This so-called heir is a scandal born of deceit. He has no right to our name, our fortune, or our home. Soon, he shall tremble before Hercule Poirot." And outside, beyond the windows, the fog thickened once more, veiling the chapel ruins where secret still lingered, and where eyes, unseen, continued to watch. Chapter 8. The Interrogations. The day after the discovery in the chapel ruins, Blackthorn Manor seemed charged with a strange electricity. Servants moved about in whispers, as though afraid to disturb the thick air of suspicion that hung over every corridor. Even the clocks ticked with a sharper rhythm, each chime echoing like a hammer against the silence. Poirot declared that, before another day passed, he must speak with each principal member of the household privately. His manner was calm, almost ceremonial, but beneath his poise there was urgency. Hastings noted the gleam in his eye and the way he paced the library, arranging the chairs just so, ensuring even the smallest detail was symmetrical. "Today, mon ami," he said quietly, "we lay the cards upon the table. Each one has his story, his excuse, his mask. But with the right questions the mask shall slip, and the truth shall peep through the cracks." The first to be summoned was Arthur. He arrived with the swagger of indignation, his chin high, his hands thrust into his pockets as if to show defiance. Poirot gestured towards the chair opposite. "Sit, if you please, Monsieur Arthur. We shall talk as gentlemen, n'est-ce pas?" Arthur dropped into the chair, crossing one leg over the other. "If this is another attempt to lend credence to that impostor's claim, you'll find me uncooperative, Poirot. I've said it before and I'll say it again. He's here for money, nothing more." Poirot folded his hands together. "Ah, you are quick to dismiss, monsieur. But consider. The letters, the locket, the diary. Do these speak of an impostor, or of a truth too long concealed?" Arthur's face hardened. "My father was many things, but he was not a fool. He would never have endangered the estate with some bastard's son." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You speak with great certainty. Yet how well did Lady Eleanor?" She entered with dignity, her gown of mourning blacker than the shadows themselves. She sat without invitation, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap like a queen upon her throne. "You mean to strip me of every shred of peace, Monsieur Poirot," she said coldly. "But I will endure. I have endured worse." Poirot bowed his head. "Madame, you have suffered, I do not doubt. But it is not peace that I seek. It is justice. For your husband. For the truth." She raised her chin. "Then ask, and I shall answer." Poirot studied her carefully. "Tell me, madame, when you learned of Emily Harwood, of her child, what did you feel?" Her voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. "Betrayal. Humiliation. To think that while I played the dutiful wife, he kept her memory hidden, cherished. It was as though I were nothing but a shadow at his side." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, madame, you stood to lose much if the truth were revealed. Not only your pride, but your place, your security, the estate, perhaps even your son's inheritance." She looked at him sharply. "Are you suggesting I killed him?" "I suggest nothing, madame. I observe only that jealousy is a passion most deadly, and betrayal, a wound that festers until it poisons." For the first time, Lady Eleanor's composure cracked. She clasped her hands tightly, her knuckles white. "If I had killed him, Monsieur Poirot, do you think I would weep for him still? No. I would dance upon his grave. But I did not. I am guilty of nothing but loving a man who never loved me in return." Poirot inclined his head. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you are guilty of loving him too much to let another take his place." Her eyes blazed, but she said no more. She rose, gathering her skirts, and departed with regal silence. Clara Whitmore was summoned next. She entered timidly, her hands clasped, and honesty is rare in this house. Her voice trembled as she rose. "Do you believe Edward is truly his son?" Poirot regarded her with solemn eyes. "I believe he is someone's son, mademoiselle. Whether of Lord Blackthorn or of another, that remains to be proved. But I believe also that the truth is feared. And where truth is feared, murder follows." Finally, Edward Graves was summoned once more. He entered with a mixture of pride and defiance, though fatigue shadowed his face. Poirot regarded him steadily. "Monsieur Graves, you claim to seek only justice for your mother. Yet you came by night to the ruins. You concealed your presence until discovered. These are not the actions of one who is innocent of secrecy." Edward's voice was hoarse. "I had no choice. Without proof, I am nothing. They all despise me. They call me liar, thief, impostor. What else could I do?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, monsieur, if you are indeed his son, then you inherit more than a name. You inherit enemies. Already there are those who would see you silenced, for your existence threatens all they hold dear." Edward's jaw tightened. "Then let them come. I am not afraid." Poirot leaned forward suddenly, his voice sharp. "Not even afraid enough to kill, monsieur?" Edward recoiled, his face paling. "No. By God, no. I wanted him to acknowledge me, not to die. I swear it." Poirot studied him a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. I believe you speak the truth. But mark me, monsieur. The danger is greater than you know. Protect yourself, for shadows move in this house, and not all are kind." When at last the interrogations were complete, Poirot and Hastings sat together in the library, the fire crackling low. Hastings was restless, his mind overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions laid bare. "Well, Poirot," he said at last, "they all sound guilty if you ask me. Arthur with his greed, Eleanor with her jealousy, Clara with her secrets, Edward with his desperation. How can you possibly know which one struck the blow?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Broke over Blackthorn Manor that evening, with a violence that rattled the windows in their frames. Wind howled around the chimneys, rain lashed against the stone walls, and the ancient house creaked like a ship at sea. The family had gathered in the drawing room, drawn less by choice than by the oppressive sense of danger that had grown since Poirot's interrogations. Arthur stood at the mantel, staring into the fire with clenched fists. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly in her chair, her face pale but resolute. Clara hovered by the piano, her fingers tracing the keys without sound. Edward Graves kept to a shadowed corner, his eyes restless, as though expecting the walls themselves to accuse him. Poirot entered with Hastings, immaculate as ever despite the storm. He paused in the doorway, surveying the company with a slow, deliberate gaze, before advancing to the center of the room. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable weight. "For many days we have circled around the truth. Each of you holds a piece of it. Each of you has concealed something, out of pride, out of fear, out of guilt. But concealment breeds only danger. And so, tonight, we must put an end to shadows." Arthur turned sharply. "And what exactly does that mean, Poirot? Are you about to name the killer, or are we to endure more of your riddles?" Poirot lifted a finger. "Patience, monsieur. To accuse too soon is to let the guilty slip away. Instead, we must lay a trap, a snare woven of words and silence, in which the murderer will reveal himself. The room fell still. Even the storm seemed to pause as if listening. Poirot continued, "Tomorrow I shall send word to the authorities in London. The letters, the diary, the locket, they are sufficient to open the question of inheritance. If Edward Graves is indeed the son of Lord Blackthorn, then the law will decide. But tonight, tonight we speak not of inheritance but of death. For I tell you this, Lord Blackthorn—" Poirot spoke again, his tone sharper. "But to reveal it now, no, that would be too easy. Instead, we shall wait. For the guilty one, knowing that discovery approaches, will act. They will try to silence, to destroy, to flee. And when they do, then we shall have them." Arthur broke the silence with a sneer. "So we are all to sit here like prisoners, waiting for some phantom clue to save us? You insult us, Poirot." Poirot bowed slightly. "Better a prisoner tonight, monsieur, than a corpse tomorrow." The fire crackled. The wind battered the windows. Slowly the tension grew unbearable. Clara whispered, "Monsieur Poirot, is it safe for us to remain here?" Poirot's mustache twitched. Safe, perhaps not, but necessary. For only in the crucible of fear does truth reveal itself. Hours passed. The storm raged on. The family sat in uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional crack of thunder. Poirot sat motionless, eyes half closed as though dozing. But Hastings knew better. His friend's mind was alight, every sense attuned to the smallest movement. At last, near midnight, a sound came, a faint creak of a door above. Poirot's eyes snapped open. He rose swiftly. Voila! The game begins. He gestured to Hastings, and together they slipped into the hall, the family too stunned to follow at once. The great staircase loomed before them, shadows twisting in the flicker of the storm lanterns. Another sound echoed. A footstep, stealthy, moving towards the east wing. Poirot moved like a cat, silent despite his patent leather shoes. Hastings struggled to keep pace. They followed the sound down the corridor, past shuttered windows rattling in the wind, until they reached the old study, the very room where Lord Blackthorn had died. The door stood ajar. Light flickered within. Poirot pushed it open, and they entered. At the desk knelt a figure, rifling frantically through drawers, scattering papers across the floor. Him. You see, Hastings, it was no accident. He was smothered, silenced, as he tried to burn the truth. And who had most to lose from that truth? Who feared the air, the letters, the ruin of inheritance? Arthur. Always Arthur. Arthur roared, struggling against Hastings' grip. He was going to destroy everything. The estate, the name. I couldn't let him. He was going to hand it all to that bastard, that stranger. What else could I do? His voice broke, the confession spilling out like blood from a wound. The storm outside seemed to echo his fury, thunder rolling over the house. Poirot stepped back, his eyes sorrowful. Mon Dieu, so it was you. You struck not only at him, but at the truth itself. And in the end, you have destroyed all that you sought to save. At that moment, Lady Eleanor, Clara, and Edward burst into the room, drawn by the commotion. They froze, staring at Arthur, at the handkerchief, at his wild expression. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. "Arthur, my son." Arthur turned to her, his rage crumbling into despair. "I did it for us, Mother. For you, for me. To protect what was ours." But her eyes were filled not with gratitude but with horror. She sank into a chair, covering her face. Clara gave a cry. Edward stepped back in shock, and Hastings held firm. Poirot raised his hand for silence. "It is finished. The trap is sprung, the truth revealed. Tomorrow the authorities shall come, and Monsieur Arthur shall answer for his crime. Justice, mesdames et messieurs, may be slow, but it comes always in the end." And with that the storm outside began to subside, as though the house itself had been holding its breath until the truth was spoken. But Poirot, gazing at the shattered family before him, murmured softly, so that only Hastings heard. "Yet, one question remains, mon ami. Did Arthur act alone? Or does another hand, unseen, still guide the shadows?" Chapter 10. The Final Revelation. Morning broke over Blackthorn Manor with the parquet floor. He clasped his hands, his eyes sweeping over them with that peculiar mixture of warmth and mercilessness that only he could summon. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we have reached the end. The truth is ready to be spoken. But as always, it is not a simple truth. There are layers, deceits, and beneath them all, the heart of the matter." Clara leaned forward. "But surely, Monsieur Poirot, you have what you need?" Arthur confessed. "He killed Lord Blackthorn. What else is there?" Poirot tilted his head, his mustache quivering. "Oui, mademoiselle," he confessed. "But confession in the heat of anger is not always the whole truth. No." Arthur struck at his father. "Yes. But did he act alone? That is the question." Edward's eyes darted towards Lady Eleanor, then quickly away. She sat motionless, like a figure carved from marble. Poirot lifted a finger. "Let us begin at the beginning. Lord Blackthorn was a man of secrets. In his youth he fathered a child outside of wedlock, a child who grew to be Edward Graves. When he realized that his conscience could no longer carry the weight of silence, he sought to make amends. He wrote letters, he left records, and finally he attempted to destroy them, fearing scandal, but also, perhaps, fearing what others in this house might do if they learned the truth. He paused, letting the weight of the words fall. But on that night, he was prevented. He was silenced. The fire that consumed the papers was no accident. It was murder. Arthur feared the loss of inheritance, feared disgrace. He struck, and he admitted as much. But there is more, mes amis. For one does not plan a crime in the heat of a moment. One does not conceal, deceive, and mislead without help. Clara whispered. "Help? From whom?" Poirot's gaze settled on Lady Eleanor. Her lips pressed tightly together, but her eyes betrayed the faintest flicker. "It is here," Poirot said softly, "that we must examine the diary. Accuse me, of conspiring in such a crime is beneath contempt." Poirot inclined his head. "And yet, madame, the evidence points to you. Who among us had the most to lose if the truth emerged? Not Arthur alone, not Clara, not Edward, who had nothing to gain. It was you. You, Lady Eleanor, whose entire life was built upon the illusion of unbroken lineage, of a name unsullied by scandal. You could not bear to see it destroyed. He turned to Hastings. Mon ami, do you recall the slip? The one I mentioned, the detail that betrayed too much knowledge. Hastings frowned, then nodded slowly. Yes. Eleanor knew about the fire in the study, before anyone told her. She said it herself, didn't she? Exactement. Poirot's eyes glittered. When I first spoke of Lord Blackthorn's death, she remarked upon the papers that burned. But at that time I had not mentioned papers. No one had. She knew because she was there, because she had seen, perhaps even helped, to ensure that those papers were consumed. Lady Eleanor's face drained of color, but she did not falter. I merely assumed, Poirot. I guessed what he might have been doing. Poirot's voice was gentle but implacable. No, madame. You did not guess. You knew. And more, you guided Arthur, encouraged his fear, pressed upon him the urgency to act. Perhaps you never meant for murder. Perhaps you wished only that he confront his father. But when passion took hold, when Arthur struck, you did not stop him. You helped conceal it. You set the fire more firmly. You destroyed the evidence. And afterward you played the grieving widow, the dignified matriarch. But in truth you were as guilty as he. A heavy silence filled the room. Clara sobbed quietly. Edward stood frozen, his eyes wide. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled at last. And if I did, she whispered, if I sought to protect what was ours, what then? My husband betrayed me, betrayed his vows, his family with his sin, letting the family absorb the finality of it. Hastings cleared his throat. So what happens now, Poirot? Poirot's mustache quivered with melancholy pride. Now, justice takes its course. Arthur will answer for his crime before the law. Lady Eleanor, perhaps the law will be more merciful to her, for she did not strike the blow, but her conscience will not. No, that is punishment enough. He turned to Edward. And you, monsieur, you must decide what you wish to do. The estate, the inheritance, it may be yours by right. But is it worth the pain, the suffering it has caused? That is for you to judge. Edward's face was pale, but he lifted his chin. I will not let their sins define me. If I take the name, it will be to rebuild, not to preserve a lie. Poirot nodded. Bon. Then perhaps from this darkness a light may come. The room fell silent once more. Outside the storm had passed, and a thin shaft of sunlight pierced the clouds, striking the old crest above the mantel. Poirot looked upon it and murmured softly, Blackthorn. Even the strongest tree may rot from within if its roots are poisoned. But cut away the rot and still it may stand. And with that, the little Belgian detective gathered his hat and cane. Come, Hastings. Our work here is done. The diary is no longer forbidden. The truth has been written in every heart. And Hercule Poirot has once again obeyed the dictates of order and reason. They left the shattered family behind, the echoes of revelation still trembling in the air, as the house of Blackthorn faced its reckoning at last.